Today, Sam, I'm going to tell you about a house and a woman. It may be all I'll tell you today, because it was quite a long story. The house is called Dimbola, and it is at Freshwater, and it was owned by a very famous woman called Julia Margaret Cameron. I don't know whether you can see that.
I'll take photos of it.
Good,
Yeah.
take photographs later, but I do have photographs of Dimbola. There's a little book here, and it's called Julia's House, and this was written by a lady who lived later in Julia's house. And there's some things I'd like to read first before I go into what actually Julia had to say to us. She was an amazing woman, absolutely amazing, and she drew people from all the artists, writers, poets, because of course she was a friend of Tennyson's, and I think she had a marvellous life at Dimbola. She actually came from India to Dimbola, but however, I shall go into that later. But I thought I would read you this first, so that people know who Julia is. And her name was Julia Margaret Cameron. And in 1835, Julia first met Sir John Herschel, one of whose scientific interests was the use of chemicals in photographic processing. Herschel later informed Julia of subsequent technical developments, in particular the wet collodion process, invented by Frederick Scott Arthur in 1851. In 1863, with Mr. Cameron away in Ceylon, her daughter Julia and son-in-law Charles Norman gave Julia, now aged 48, a camera as a Christmas present to cheer her up. It may amuse you, Mother, to try to photograph during your solitude at Freshwater. Well, that led to great things indeed. It was at Dimbola that the greatest of Julia Margaret Cameron's photographs were taken. It is extraordinary that she achieved subtle tonal effects from what was in effect a tumble-down greenhouse, which had previously served as a chicken coop. Julia blanketed out the glass panes with adjustable roller blinds to direct the available light to where she wanted it. I turned my coal house into my darkroom, and a glazed fowl house I had given to my children became my glass house. The society of hens and chickens was soon changed for that of poets, prophets, painters, and lovely maidens. Julia threw herself into a new hobby with typical enthusiasm. The photographic lens has become to me as a living edge of the art. I did not know where to place my dark box, how to focus my sitter, and my first picture I effaced to my consternation by rubbing my hand over the filmy side of the glass. She was halfway through taking a photograph when a splutter of laughter came from one of the children. Lost me that picture. And less ambitious now, I took one child alone, appealing to her feelings and telling her of the waste of poor Mrs. Cameron's chemicals and strength if she moved. The appeal had its effect, and I now produced a picture which I called my first success. Onto the back lawn of Dimbola were herded, often protesting and sometimes in bizarre costume, the cream of the poets, prophets, painters of the century. Tennyson, Browning, Rossetti, Alice Liddell, Thomas Carlyle, Ellen Terry, Longfellow, Holman Hunt, G.F. Watts, Darwin, Trollope. All were cajoled to suffering for her art. A sitting could take hours, requiring numerous costume changes and frequent retakes. Tennyson advised the American poet Henry Wadsworth Longfellow before his sitting that, "You will have to do whatever she tells you. I will come back soon and see what is left of you." Within a year, she had begun to present her friends with albums of her work, and had obtained a London dealer, and I'm not sure how to pronounce this, Colnaghi's, and was elected a member of the Photographic Society in London. It was still a painful process, both for subject, who had to sit absolutely still for as long as 10 minutes, and photographer, who was not only in close contact with potentially dangerous chemicals and acids, but had to carefully manipulate light and shade, working literally in the dark. Her darkroom still survives, though it now forms part of a residential flat. The glass house is gone, its site covered by concrete, in front of a modern block of flats built on part of what was formerly Julia's garden. The results of her burst of photographic energy are increasingly prized. They are now represented in museums and photographic collections throughout the world, with regular travelling exhibitions of her work. Julia Cameron is seen as a pioneer. Almost alone, she turned the photographic portrait into an art form to rival the greatest paintings. Like Watts, who attempted to paint a gallery of the Victorian age, Cameron was self-consciously recording and creating a pantheon. Again, like Watts, what I try for is the half-conscious insistence of the nobilities of the subjects. Both artists also created a series of posed tableaux, some sublime, some ridiculous, drawn from classical and biblical mythology. For these purposes, the unfortunate Mr. Cameron and the poet Henry Taylor, a frequent visitor, were often dressed in ancient costumes as elders: Friar Lawrence, King David, Prospero, King Ahasuerus, were all roles played for the camera by Taylor with his luxuriant white beard. Julia chose her maids for their beauty as well as their work rate. The local cobbler's daughter, Mary Hillier, became a noted model for Madonnas and would terrorise the local children into donning swan's wings or halos, much to their obvious embarrassment. The funniest satire on these aspects of Mrs. Cameron's eccentric household is Lynn Truss's novel, Tennyson's Gift, though the self-contained world which Julia created around herself and Tennyson has fuelled a whole raft of poems, histories, TV programmes and radio broadcasts, and it cannot be long before a feature film based on the Cameron Circle is in production. Well, I think that's enough of that, and now I will tell you how Julia came into our lives. It all started one evening. We'd been doing a healing session, and Margot had been doing healing at the time when all this magnificent stuff came on her hands. It was silver and blue and gold, and it used to come on the patient's body as well, wherever Margot was touching them. And this particular day, we were told by the guides that we had to sit in meditation for absent healing. So Margot and Wally came over to my place in the evening, and we sat in our little sitting room, which wasn't much bigger than this, and went into meditation and prayer for those who were having the absent healing. Well, Wally and I just sat there quietly, doing our thing, whatever we were doing. And suddenly, this voice came from Margot. And the voice said, that her name was Julia Cameron, that she had plantations in Ceylon, and the word Dimbola. Well, we had no idea, absolutely no idea who Julia Cameron was, and we had no idea where Dimbola was or anything. So Wally and I are just sitting there, and it came out in a sort of whispered voice. And Margot eventually comes round from whatever she's doing, and she said, I've had the most wonderful time. I said, well, so have we. And she said, I was away out of my body. She said the patients were laying on doctor's plinths. She said, and I was dipping my hands like this, she said, into this golden ointment, great big tubs of golden ointment. She said, and I was massaging their bodies like this with this golden ointment. And as she did this, and Margot had very long nails, as she did this, I looked at her hands, and there was all this yellow ointment in her nails and on her hands. Well, and we said to Margot, well, have you seen your hands? And she looked at her hands, and oh my goodness, she said, well, that proves I've been out there doing that. Anyway, and then we told her what had happened, that someone, while she was off out of her body, someone else had come in and said they were Julia Cameron. She said, well, who's Julia Cameron? I said, well, none of us know. So, the next day, her guide came through, John Powell's, and he said, I don't know whether I've got his actual words here. He said, she was informed that the actual letters of the name Julia Cameron held a code of importance, and the meaning was given as follows. Julia. Just understand, love is all. Cameron, Cameron. Coming again, masters, ever ruling over nations. And that was what we were given. Well, I remembered, that the masters had been foretold for many years that a master or masters would be returning. And I filed it away and left it at that. And the next morning, I got up and I thought, I'll just go into Newport this morning. So that was that. I forgot all about Julia Cameron and went into Newport. And I'm walking down past one of the little streets. It was behind what was then BHS, British Home Stores. And it was a little bookshop, and it was called Mr. Micawber's Bookshop. Long gone, like most of the lovely things. And I looked in the window, and there's a big book, this big, in the window. And it said, Julia Margaret Cameron and her circle. I will show it to you. I went straight in and bought it. There it is. Sadly, I sold it some years ago, so I don't still have it in my collection. However, from that book that we learnt that Julia was this very famous photographer, that she'd entertained all the wonderful people of the day, was a great friend of Tennyson, and so we thought, well, perhaps we'd better go over and have a look at Dimbola. Anyway, and of course it was the face of Julia Margaret Cameron, and written in large gold letters, by the way. And I learned long ago there is no such thing as coincidence. It was obviously the universe on the telephone again to me to say, well, you better look into this because it's important. And it said that her house in Freshwater was named Dimbola after their plantation in Ceylon. And also she'd mentioned Ceylon as well the previous evening. And that was verification for me, personally, of the voice that had spoken through Margot. And we visited Freshwater again with the intention of walking to the Tennyson Memorial on the top of the Downs there. It was a lovely day, and we walked up and halfway up, and then we made ourselves comfortable. And up on the Downs, there used to be, I don't know if it's still there, there's a green door which goes into Tennyson's Farringford estate that he has. And that was Tennyson's way onto the Downs. He used to come out of the garden straight onto the Downs. And we were sitting there, and suddenly Margot heard Julia speaking. And she said, she used to walk on the Downs and coming up through the green door from Farringford. And one evening, as she was walking there alone, she saw a strange craft not far from where she walked. She watched as it took off and disappeared. And later she told Tennyson of this incident, but sadly it caused a rift in their friendship, as he did not believe a word she said, despite her insistence that she was telling the truth. And Julia said that she now knew that this craft is what we call a UFO today, and she suggested we paid a visit to Farringford in the near future. Well, Wally decided that if we had to pay a visit to Farringford, he would treat Margot and I to lunch, because at that time it was a hotel. So Margot and I went and had a delightful lunch in the dining room at Farringford, and we had our coffee in Tennyson's study. And as we were sitting in the study, Tennyson spoke to Margot, and he told her that when he was writing his Idylls of the King, which was his Arthurian epic, all the cast of characters presented themselves on the terrace outside his study and spoke with him. Well, I loved that, because Arthur has always been my hero, and all those wonderful stories. That's what started me on all this all those years ago. And he also spoke of his rift with Julia and the spacecraft, but he now realised it was indeed the truth he told. Well, Cameron House, when we went to visit Dimbola and Cameron House, Dimbola had been a hotel. Half of it had been a hotel. The Dimbola side had been a hotel. The other side was, it was up for demolition. It had got the demolition big rails around it, site unapproachable, do not enter, due for demolition. Horrified. Beautiful architecture. And I thought, why on earth are they demolishing this wonderful place? And I felt very sad. Anyway, it was later on in 92, Margot and I visited Dimbola again. And this is also when it was up for demolition. And as we walked past, Julia was standing there. Margot said, "Can you see her?" I said, "No, I can't see her." She said, "Well, she's standing between the lions, and there was the middle entrance, which is at the tower, by the tower. She was standing just at the bottom of the steps between the lions and standing there." And this is what she said. She walked to the front of Cameron House and spoke to Margot as one Margaret to another, because Margot's name was actually Margaret, but she didn't like it, so she called herself Margot. Francis Bamford often referred to her as Margaret as well, but Julia said as one Margaret to another. She said she did not want her house pulled down. And Julia stated that the two of them together were very powerful. She then told Margot she'd put something in one of her shoes. And it was a piece of a vase that had once stood in her drawing room on the piano. It was an agate vase, and it had fallen off and smashed, and a piece of it had slipped down between the floorboards. And Julia had taken this piece of the vase and placed it in Margot's shoe. And Margot's standing there, and suddenly she said, "There's something in my shoe." And she took her shoe off, and there was this small chip of agate that Julia had placed there. Very powerful indeed. Julia was wearing a long grey dress with a full skirt and a wide lace collar. Her hair was drawn up into a bun at the nape of her neck. We both wished that Julia's desire for her house to remain could come true, but felt in all honesty that neither of us could do anything about it. But you know, we don't only work on the physical level, we also work on different levels as well. And I suppose the way I look at it now, Margot's power, because she had tremendous spiritual power, and Julia somehow managed to inspire a trust to be set up that raised the money to save Dimbola, and it was bought at a very reasonable price. And so there it stands today, in memory of Julia Margaret Cameron and all the people that she drew to it. She was really quite an amazing woman. But I said, the rest of the tale is now history. By some power the money was raised, and Dimbola stands a fine memorial to a remarkable woman of her time. Long may it do so, and may it herald a return to Freshwater of the best literary, dramatic and artistic talent. Thanks to Julia Margaret Cameron, may her presence continue to be felt and seen. The coincidences continued to happen, and I returned to Dimbola on December the 7th to see the renovation project, and I felt this story should be told to those whose dream this is. And I met the director, Ron Smith, and I told him all that had happened, and he asked me to write it down, which I did, and I gave it to him. But I knew that he wasn't. He was interested, but he didn't really believe. He wasn't a believer in what I was telling him. But anyway, I wrote it all down, and somewhere it's hidden away, the notes that I gave to him. That was Ron Smith. But the amazing thing is, when I went over and gave this to Ron Smith in Freshwater, and I drove back, and when I got home, my eldest daughter Sarah was on the phone, and I heard her saying, "Oh, don't worry," she said, "my mother's just been over to Dimbola. She knows where it is and she'll give me the directions." She had only been asked by the agency that she was working for to go and work at Dimbola for the next 2 or 3 days. And you know, I felt Julia had followed me home, because how else? I'd just come from Dimbola, and my daughter, who was doing temping at the time, she was just going back to Dimbola. So that was our particular story of Julia. But it didn't end there. because that was in, I think it was 1992, the last time I went with Margot. However, since the restoration has been done, and there's been a lot more restoration done since, because somebody, I understand, gave Dimbola rather a lot of money, a few, thousands, to have it completely, all the front done up and the restoration inside, and it's all been done beautifully. And it was recently opened again. It was covered with scaffolding for quite some time, and it was recently opened again, and there was a presence there, and people were aware of it. And it just so happened that my friend Melina's partner, Pete, worked at Dimbola at the time, and he said to Melina, "Do you know anyone who could come and see what's going on at Dimbola, because it's not very pleasant?" So she rang me up, and I said, "Well, it just so happens that Robin's down at the moment, and he could come over and see what's going on at Dimbola." So this is what we got. 13th of September 2020, Robin was called to clear energies. He said, "Great changes upon us all, and happening now with a capital C." With reference to Julia Margaret Cameron and Dimbola. Julia Margaret Cameron was a custodian of the arts and created a parallel for energy to flow. Early on in the inquiry, the spiritual link informed Robin that due to spiritual and psychic expectation, Julia was expected to appear in ghost form, which was not going to be the case in real time. However, due to the expectation, malingerers of the lower astral planes came in her place and imitated Julia's form, as well as her energy, hence the odd feeling in the building. In truth, she would not appear for such a low-level request. The area of Dimbola was now tainted because these energies remained in the place all the time the opportunity remained. Understanding the reason how the lower astral forms found their way to the property would contribute towards the understanding of how to send them on their way. All energy deserves respect, no matter what it portrays. It was suggested that a simple prayer and request would suffice with the task of release, with the strict suggestion, no more witch hunts. Apparently, there had been ghost walks locally, and Dimbola had been visited, much to the dislike of some. This had possibly contributed to the continual disturbances at the property, the home place of Julia Margaret Cameron. And on the 29th of September, Julia was a lady of her time and was not fully aware of the work she assisted with, and this is the case for many souls. If we are to look at the planet Earth as a cell divided amongst many others within the cosmos, each individual cell has differing needs, and this is delivered to the cells via cosmic energy. The ramifications of how this system works deserves a document of its own. With regards to planet Earth, if you can imagine a house has an electrical system providing its needs, the cosmic electrical grid does much the same for planet Earth. This energy emanates from the inner sanctum of the planet and flows out via a network. The places where these avenues of energy surface tend to be high-profile areas of significance. The energy portrayed from these areas match the unique needs of the planet and its inhabitants, depending on the energetic requirement. At the entrance of these avenues stands a custodian that limits and monitors the use of such energy. Unfortunately, these places are not impregnable and do get abused. Energy knows no boundaries, both good and bad. In the case of Julia Margaret Cameron, she became a custodian for a remarkable avenue of artistic expression emanating from the arena of Dimbola. In short, the expression of art, word, song, movement, and so on could be enhanced dramatically whilst bathing in these energies. This is by no means unique, but in earthly terms it was and still is. Dimbola became a hub for just about every kind of artisan and fed his or her whims. The dance of joy from those that knew was legendary and still remains so. To be a custodian of energy is a privilege. A Russian man who called JMC Marguerite, and that was voiced in a Russian accent, Robin said, because he's receiving this, knew of her custodianship and assisted her in the latter years of her life. She was visited from beings of the stars many times, but remembers very few occasions. The starmen taught her in her sleep, as well as in daydreams, how to be and how to act whilst in waiting with high-profile guests was the order of the day. The art, song, word and dance that followed continued to be revered today in the hidden treasures that came from this courtship. Concealed in the words and mapping of these masterpieces are clues to the universe, as well as how we might once again remember the human ancestral heritage we have lost. God bless you, my child, and thank you for listening. Julia Margaret Cameron. Robin was told that this was her soul talking, as well as fragments of the starmen that visited her. So on September the 30th, Robin and Sue met with Melina and Pete and Brian, who is the custodian now at Dimbola. He is the, I don't know what his official title is, where the instructions for the place were carried out as was requested, with the Lord's Prayer voiced amongst the group, and compassionate offerings issued to the astral forms that filled the space once occupied by goodwill. The process was well received and a shift occurred, reminding us that change can happen when good intent and wisdom is applied. And then a few days later, Robin got this. It is with regret that we inform you that it will take a week or two for energy to calm at Dimbola. As with moving to a new house, things take time. The best intent must be satisfied with patience and goodwill. Now, this is what he got next. A child sits and plays with his or her toys, whilst the adult flirts around enjoying so-called freedom. This child is at the mercy of the inner drive of the trained adult, or that is what is thought, at least. The mother, as we call her, is not the lady with the birthright, but in truth, this is the genetics the child inherits. We must remove social grace here and simplify matters. The mother is the soul. The father is the sun. And I think they meant the sun that shines in our heaven. And the child is the spirit. So the soul is the mother, the father is the son, and the child is the spirit. The journey is not into the unknown, but into a playing field of unknown quantity. The cosmos changes its shape along with the characteristics of its components. These parts are all vibrating fields of dynamic energy. The sun is a reflective field of dying or living energy, depending on its input and output. It is like a furnace of discovery, devouring its booty and haul of gifts. This process is known to the creational force as the provider of cosmic energy. Now, my children, where, you wonder, is this all going? And why is the portal point at Dimbola of significance? A pathway to the arts comes through a child, be it in adult or diminutive form. The art designates expression in a way no other energy can on earth. Its content must stay pure and uninterrupted. Many similar portal points, such as the like in freshwater, are once again opening their valves and releasing huge quantities of cosmic energy out into the space above Earth. This creative expression will gather in quantity, and so will the expression of gratitude. This gratitude has no place at the bottom of a well or hidden in plain sight. It will envelop the world like a dove protecting its young with its fine, expansive wings. The guardians of these spaces are clearing the entrances of these portals so nothing will be harmed, hence the boy assisting with the clearing of the Dimbola opening. All energy forms are in a process of growth, and it is wished that nothing is caught in the release of this new enveloping cosmic ray of gratitude. This action places plausible solution on the plates of all those who choose to dine at the long table of goodness and well-being. And then Robin said, "A choice was in our laps, and the huge changes we witness on the planet are necessary for a massive shift to take place. And those in the know are in some way facilitators and custodians of the new consciousness being born. This is the first time that the human framework, will die whilst being alive. The time is upon us where this huge shift is taking place and altering the face of possibility forever. The options will depend on where the individual soul places the heart energy. We, the source of knowledge in your domain, regain a foothold with the mortal soul carriers and place huge stock in the need to hang on to the soul at all costs. To give away the starlight within would be like giving away your firstborn to the first passer-by that asks. The soul is the keystone to your universe and all known universes. So may God be with you and all that catch the cosmic train to the biggest dinner party in history. Just bring yourself and your thoughts along. And Robin said, we were told years ago the human soul was in peril. The splintering of the soul and the loss of masculine and feminine would be the start of this loss. How many of the youth today have lost the ability to discern their sex and preference? Fragmentation of the human characteristic demeans its eventual ability to preserve itself. The cosmic energy discussed in the virtues of this document has visited the surface of this planet on a number of occasions, but never has such an accumulation taken place. So many other planetary bodies have contributed to the cause and continue to do so for very good reasons. This upload has ramifications way beyond the physical eye. Everyone from all sources looks down with a watchful eye at this unique growth of planet Earth and her occupants. The 1960s was an era when this energy came in bucket loads, but drugs became the catalyst to drastically reduce the flow and halt a rise in human consciousness that would have had massive effects on those that bathed in its remarkable energy. The music and passion that flowed in that era was inspirational and very similar to the tidal flow stemming from Dimbola, curated by Julia Margaret Cameron. People are to read this information, and in doing so, the mapping will start to peel away from the soul and begin its journey towards gratitude and well-being. No words are enough to change events of both past, present and future, but they will be enough to let the true energy of gratitude begin the change required from the start. And I think that's where I might end for the moment. So it seems that the 1960s opened a great portal for this music and expression of soul to come through, and it was killed by drugs, which of course was the agenda to not allow it to come through. John Lennon was killed, and he was a great expression of what life should be and not what it is. And I think this is what we are being told now. You know, we have to express from the heart and express our creativity in order that consciousness can rise. And this is what we're doing. This is what this is what I'm doing with my stories. I'm trying to make people aware that, A, death is not the end, because so many people are afraid of death. So many people fear the moment of death. But in fact, the moment of death is just going through a door into a far more beautiful place if you've lived a good and conscientious life. But if you've allowed your physicality to go into other realms that are, I would rather not mention, then you will get your just desserts. But I feel that it was important to speak about Julia today. And I often go over to Freshwater, have a cup of tea in there. It's now a tea rooms and it's open to everybody. And I feel that she is still, she's obviously still there to speak to people, but what people were thinking was Julia was not in fact Julia. It was just astral forms imitating her. But I think Julia will have a lot more to say. But it was interesting. I found that they said that there were codes, excuse me, codes in the art and the poetry. So it would be well worth going into the artists who came to Freshwater and look at their work and see what they were putting into their work as a result of being in this portal of consciousness. So there you are. That's my story for the day. It was about the Christ consciousness is within the changes. Can you not understand the Christ consciousness within this new millennium will be in your conscious thinking to be tapped into? The Christ realised on his last visit that he was wasting much energy in trying to teach many deaf ears when only a few bright ears were prepared to listen. And unfortunately, misinterpretation of many of the teachings were created, hence your book, The Christ Bible. We do not have time nor the inclinations for this children's Bible, as I would put it. Much has been altered and changed to suit your shops called the churches, to interpret what they required for the manifestation of well-being for the people that run these shops. I bid you that these unfortunate fellows will not only have a further 2,000 years of the recreation of the physical form, I think they may have 4,000. Now, can you imagine the people who are doing what they're doing to this planet at the moment? They're going to have another 4,000 years of recreating the physical body. And many of us, you know, have given up our soul, what do they call it, our soul growth to come back here, to be here at this particular time. The Christ consciousness is now within the spiritual movement that is working towards the transitional change. He is there in every molecule of positive thinking. You are all now disciples of the Christ consciousness. We must always never, ever venture too far away from the fact that spirituality runs always along the lines of God consciousness, and if it develops away from these two single lines, then you are off the rails. Always remember, the Christ consciousness is behind the manifestation of the changes. He is not the creation of the changes, he is behind the thinking of the changes. The Christ is born in every individual mind of light and is available for that thinking. This is the sort of stuff we've had given to us. It's amazing.